A very warm welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. I'm Ritwika Gupta and you're watching our festive special lineup. Tonight, we are turning our attention to India's logistics sector. With the surge in consumer demand during Diwali, logistics faces its own set of challenges. To explore how the sector is ramping up for the festive season, we have an exclusive conversation with Rampraveen Swaminathan, MD and CEO of Mahindra Logistics. Ram, it's a pleasure to have you today on ET Now Leaders of Tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
So as you know, we are having this conversation in line with the festive season. So my first question to you would be to really tell us your expectations from the festive season. What's the kind of demand you're expecting, any trends you're excited about, and overall, how is Mahindra Logistics gearing up for the festivities?
So obviously it's an important 6 or 8 weeks for us. Starts off with a whole bunch of sales which specific brands do, but then ends obviously with Diwali and the post-Diwali festivities. So I think from our perspective, we are going live with around 1.2 million square feet of warehousing facilities, a lot of between the east and the western part of India. And probably adding around 70 to 80 delivery stations. We will be expanding another 1,000 pin codes, close to 1,000 pin codes. And seasonally, of course, we'll hire around 11,000 people this year.
Yeah, we'll speak to you about that as well.
So it's a big rush period for us, but I think we're well geared this year, both in terms of our infrastructure and resources. I think it's very early to call how it'll actually be. The last couple of years, peaks have not turned out the way we expected.
Right.
But I think I'm a bit more optimistic this year. We seem to have had a good run with some of the smaller festives running up to this. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
Well, absolutely. Ram, one of the key challenges during the festive season is ensuring efficient last mile delivery. And I read that you've deployed about 1,600 EVs across more than 20 cities in India. So if you could talk to us about your last mile delivery segment and how you're approaching that this time. So
we do obviously right now our last mile delivery business, we do B2C deliveries in around 6,000 pin codes. So that's probably around 30-35% of India's pin codes, but it's a large part of India's actual population in terms of consumption. We have 400 delivery stations, and we operate around 6,000 to 7,000 vehicles. So around a third of that's electric. The remaining is still ICE vehicles of different kinds. I think the large challenges really are around running the fleet. And ensuring that manpower is adequately available and trained. And so we have specific programs to get people on, right, and train them. And of course, ensure that our assets are operating properly and get deliveries appropriately. I think a couple of challenges this year, I think, which are a bit different from others. I think internally we've set higher targets to have more diversity in our delivery associate organization. And that's a bit of a challenge, getting them on board, ensuring that it works well with them. So we'll see how that goes actually. It's been a bit of a step up internally. I think the other thing, of course, is just the rise of quick commerce has meant that delivery slots have become a lot tighter. Right? And that means obviously you're kind of working the treadmill a little bit harder. And the third thing is we have become a lot more tier 2, tier 3. So we are in places like Barrackpore and Dasra and so on, and these are far more hinterland locations which we are right now operating, and many of them will go live this festive. So we are kind of having to work through a lot of that in terms of this remote management of infrastructure. But they're kind of similar problems we have every year, right? So hopefully, I think we're well set up this year, and we'll have a good peak.
Ram, so sustainability is also becoming a crucial subject for industries across sectors. Tell me, how are you at Mahindra Logistics taking to sustainability? How are you adopting green practices across your verticals?
So I think, as you've seen, the Paris Agreement requires all of us to limit temp control to less than 1.5 degrees. The Mahindra Group has always been the forefront of this transition, and I think for us at Mahindra Logistics also it's very critical. We are committed to become net zero by 2040, and that is a very large span of operations. Logistics remains a big contributor to emissions. For us, we've approached this in two ways. The first one I think is the back-end supply side, because for any customer because we are a function of our customers' energy transition. Now our clients actually have to commit to doing an energy transition themselves, and only then they will actually work with us, right? So one thing we're trying to do is ensure we have the right suite of offerings which is available. So that's across transportation, warehousing infrastructure, and in terms of operating practices. On transportation, I think as you may already aware, we do operate India's largest electric vehicle fleet. It's around 1,600 to 2,000 vehicles across 20 plus cities, and we do a lot of small pack delivery with that, right? So that's one big part of our focus. The other thing which we're doing on transportation is doing a lot of ICE-based solutions which actually do reduce your footprint. So we have an offering called Pro Trucking, which is a high-performance fleet operation which allows you to resize your vehicle classes, reduce the number of kilometers you run, effectively reducing your CO2 load. We also on the warehousing side have made a big investment. We already have or are in process of having over 7 million square feet of platinum or gold certified facilities which maintain a high standard of governance or sustainability through the entire construction cycle. Our offices are all certified, so in fact if you come and see our offices, everything is recycled from the carpets to the material we use inside the flooring. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do. And the third thing is circular practices, which is on a continuous basis, replacing wooden pallets with recycled pallets, operating process where you run to zero liquid discharge in our facilities, do plastic elimination and so on. So that's a big part of being able to provide a solution. But the larger thing which we've also been trying to do is help solve the demand side, which is most customers in India do not actually understand what the real CO2 load of their operation is.
Right.
So we have recently launched an analytics platform which allows all our customers to go online and get real-time visibility or near real-time visibility of how their carbon footprint actually is, what the real load of CO2 is because of their operations. And that then and then we are providing advisory services on the back of that, saying that now this is your baseline and this is what you can do to actually improve it. So it's really what I think in ecosystems which are evolving, you really have to invest in drive the transition. Right? You can't just be a supplier alone. So I think we believe that we must lead the transition by enabling them to understand their operations and creating some innovative solutions for that.
Well, fantastic. I want to zoom out a little bit. I want to talk about the big picture. How do you think India's logistics sector is contributing to the overall India story, India's growth narrative, the broader economy?
So obviously there's some straightforward correlations, right? I mean, you can't grow if you don't have logistics operating. So it's a line which we often use, that if you want to make in India, you have to move in India. So I think logistics is a core infrastructure which connects the country, and therefore growth is inextricably tied to that. I think on the positive side, India is well positioned in many levers of logistics, and I think over the years we are very well connected as a country in many ways, and logistics has been something which has helped drive the country's development. Logistics services in India are significantly underpriced compared to other parts of the world, right? Just in terms of purchase price. So that's the positive side of it. I think the challenges are that logistics in India still carry a significant hidden cost. Right? These are not direct costs which customer pays, but because there's a lot of inefficiency in the system, there are hidden costs around it, which are like higher inventory turns, order losses, and so on. And that's what I think the sector is really geared up to start getting better at, right? Sure. With better policy regulation, better road infrastructure now, and increased focus by the government on multimodal infrastructure. I think a lot of the building blocks are getting set up to actually catapult the logistics infrastructure. And this is going to be extremely critical, because at the end of the day, if you're going to come in and make anything in India, and if India has to grow as an export hub, we have to be really competitive, from door to door, right? So when you are competing with any other country, our customers are going to say, if I made it from source on a TCO basis, till it lands in the consumption location, are you capable of doing it? And logistics is a big element of that. I think much work has been done in the last decade, which to kind of set this up really. And I think today I would say we are in a much better position to really enable growth rather than support growth, right? And I think that's a big shift which has happened in the last few years.
It's time for a quick break here. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back to IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. You're joining us for our festive special lineup, and tonight we are diving into the bustling world of India's logistics to understand how the sector is preparing for the festive rush. In conversation with Mahindra Logistics. You spoke about the Make in India initiative, and the government has also come up with a lot of ambitious plans, like there's a PLI scheme for the infrastructure development. How do you think all of that is really adding to the overall, contributing to the overall growth of the logistics sector, and also adding on to the Move in India initiative?
I think obviously just a rise in economic activity is, so if we become a 5 trillion economy, whichever way it becomes, and even if logistics is 8 to 9% of GDP, you're looking at an industry which is $400 to $500 billion, right? So it's very large. Already a big multiplier because significant employer of resources, significant driver for economic activity at a pan-national basis. Right. So that's actually, I think at that level, obviously, just fundamental economic growth drives a significant amount of growth in logistics. I think the pattern of growth is very important. And I think over the last 3-4 decades, India has grown a lot through services. I think a lot of the focus around Make in India and PLI, etc., drives towards more focus around manufacturing. And that obviously carries a higher logistics index than probably services do. Right? Sure. And so therefore, I think it will have a multiplier effect on logistics. So I think this transition which the economy is making, and it depends on what velocity we maintain in that transition. I think it's going to be very beneficial. I think the other thing it is making us do is making us in the sector raise our game. Right? So a sector which has largely been informal or unorganized now is having to play to global standards. And that's great for companies which are like us, right? Because it allows us to get a bigger part of, a bigger play in terms of the value addition we make on how the supply chain operates. And I think that's a big transformation, which is very good for the larger businesses.
Right. Now, Mahindra Logistics has also been driving growth in sectors like FMCG, automotive, e-commerce. Can you talk to us a little bit about your integrated supply chain solutions that have pushed, growth in these sectors?
As I said, and this is a great segue from the earlier question, logistics in India is 12 to 14% of cost, and a large part of that's actually the inefficiencies which lie in the supply chain.
Sure.
These inefficiencies come because there are multiple legs to the supply chain, and customers traditionally have managed those interfaces themselves. So for us, the problem statement was a very simple one, saying how do we make a customer's supply chain more productive, right? Because ultimately that's what drives higher order intake, that's what drives higher profitability. And so the concept of integration has been really around saying how do we take different parts of the supply chain, integrate them together so our customer does not have to worry about those handoffs. And now that integration happens through different services, through shared infrastructure and shared technology, right? And by doing that, I think we have been able to prove today 20 to 25% of our revenues are from solutions. We are a services and solutions company. We are not one or the other. But probably a fourth of our revenue comes from solutions, and in almost all those cases, I think we have reduced the total cost of ownership for our clients significantly. That doesn't always mean that we are reducing the revenue of our services, right? But we are helping them deliver faster or deliver with higher volume in their network, and that's actually helped us create longer term value.
Now, seasonal hiring is also at its peak during this season. Tell us, how are you approaching workforce management and planning during the festivities?
Well, we have around, on a running basis, on average basis, we have around 28,000 contract resources who work in the overall ecosystem. We will be adding around 10 to 11,000 this year, which is just for an 8 to 10 week period, and then these kind of peaks come through the year, but this is the largest seasonal hiring we do. Obviously, I think our focus has always been on, I think, three things. Obviously, a big part is safety, because we are bringing resources in short term.
Sure.
Ensuring that we actually provide a fair amount of safe work environments. And that's a big part of what we do. The second, obviously, is fair recruitment, fair hiring, which is give equitable policies, benefits. That includes things like food, transportation, and so on. And the third one is ensuring that we, it's just employee engagement and keeping employees well engaged. So we have very specific programs which enable all of these on the floor, right? Because it's across hundreds of sites in the country. We also done a very series of contests, etc., to drive employee engagement and participation across the board. A couple of things I think which are different this year, obviously, is we are doing lesser migrant recruitment, and that's a big migrant workforce, a big part. We are trying this year to hire more local for local. We think that's a good way to really enrich communities on a long-term basis, because then even post the peak, they will probably be able to use that and get employment from other places.
All right.
The second one is we've been trying to drive a lot of our skill development programs along with this. So we have along with the Logistics Skill Council of India, we have a couple of community centers of excellence, as we call it, which is local training centers. Already live. One is in Bombay, the other one is in Guwahati, and we have been running programs there to try and get a better feed of people. And then the third one, of course, is we've always maintained a high accent on diversity, very broadly: veterans, people with disabilities, gender, of course, right, the LGBTQI community, and that's a particular focus of what we are trying to do. And the last thing which we have made an effort on this year is a lot of our season hiring is in warehouses, but a lot of it's also in the delivery organization and the trucking parts of our business.
Okay.
So this year we are doing a bit more work around wellness for those categories of employees. More on-site support and more support at stations, rest facilities for them. So we are augmenting a bunch of those things along with the peak this year as well.
Fantastic. And well, as we wrap up this interview, tell us what is the road ahead for Mahindra Logistics? No pun intended, but where do you see the company in the next 5-10 years?
So I think we've set some very specific and well-defined goals, both in terms of financial targets as well as non-financial targets. I think for me, the real focus is to try and build an organization which creates a customer value proposition. We think that as in business-to-business enterprise, or enterprise-focused organization, we create value by helping customers make their supply chains better. We are now the most integrated player in the country, right? We have unmatched capabilities in many ways. We have full truckload, warehousing, part truckload, cross-border logistics, and all of that's in-house, all of that's integrated through tech. Right, through fairly common operating systems. So our USP has really been that core thing, that we have a very strong integration, a multiple set of services are very strongly aligned, a very strong industrial excellence design in the way we operate our facilities. So it's not just jugaad, for the lack of any other word. We have fair amount of operating systems and policies on how we run them, which drive a lot of dependability in the way we deliver products. And the third thing is that we have a great organization. People who are engaged, committed to kind of delivering it, because this is a high volume, high transaction business, and getting it right on the floor is very important. You've got to get right in every mile. And I think the real thing for us over the next 4 or 5 years is to build that, continue to build that. We build that, financial metrics and everything is the outcomes of doing that.
Nice.
So we have, I think building that, I think, is more important, and investing in the communities we work in is really critical. Obviously, we've set some financial metrics, which I'm very confident will happen over the next 2-3 years.
Well, all the best to you, and this was a very comprehensive conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. Tomorrow we'll be bringing you our final episode in our week-long special festive lineup, focusing on retail and consumer durables. Wishing you all a wonderful Diwali. Thank you for watching today's episode. Good night.